there. Isn't that fun?
Who knows?
Okay. We don't jump in anything really complicated at first. It's just simple stuff, genealogy type stuff. And then later on, we'll get into security clearances and
Okay.
top secret stuff and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Stuff that you're not allowed to tell me anyway.
I'm allowed to tell you? You're
Yeah.
not allowed to tell you.
Not allowed to tell me.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you could, but then you'd have to dispose of me. You know.
There are times when I thought of doing that anyway.
Okay, here's just some basic stuff. What is your full name, and why were you named that?
Charles Albert Fiedler. Why I was named that? Because my mother told me that.
Do you know who you were named after or anything?
I wasn't named after anybody. My dad's name was Carl, supposedly. They called him Charlie, so that's all I can tell you about it.
Did you have any nicknames when you were growing up?
Chuck. And some I can't repeat. Quite a few I can't repeat. Beyond that, no.
Would you consider those nicknames exactly, the ones you can't repeat?
Well, they nicked it a little bit, yeah, at times.
Did you have any nicknames as an adult? Besides Chuck?
Charlie. That's it.
And
My mother said it was Charles, and that's all she would call. And when she said it in a certain way, you knew you were in trouble.
She wouldn't ever call you anything but Charles?
Never. Never.
What do your family members call you now?
Behind my back, I don't know.
Okay, in front of your back.
My wife calls me Charlie, Chuck, sweetheart, honey. I don't know what anybody else calls me.
I call you Grandpa.
I got 3 kids that call me Dad. And I got a couple of kids that call me Grandpa. That's about it.
Where were you born and when?
Where or why?
Well, you know,
I was born in Spooner, Wisconsin.
Spooner?
Spooner, Wisconsin, August 14th, 1921. My mother had many times said, I don't know why I didn't drown you when you were a pup. But beyond that, that's all I can tell you about it. I had a brother that was born in Turtle Lake, Wisconsin.
Do you remember your great-grandparents?
My great-grandpa, I never knew my great-grandpa.
Did you know either one of your great-grandpas?
I knew, no. I knew my granddad on my mother's side, and I knew my grandmother on my mother's side, but I never knew any of the other relatives. Brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts. Well, I shouldn't say that. I know my mother's sisters, and I did know Aunt Nora and Uncle Will, who was a tailor, and that was my mother's uncle.
But your great-grandparents, you don't have any recollection of them?
Never met them, never knew them.
What about your grandparents?
I knew my granddad and my grandmother on my mother's side. That's all. I knew my step-granddad very briefly before he died. But beyond that, I didn't know any of the rest of the family.
What kinds of things do you remember about them? What kind of memories do you have?
My granddad, that he was, when I was a kid, he was a mammoth man with a big, solid mustache. And as I got older, he got smaller. And when he died, he could almost walk under my arm.
Oh, wow.
But he did shrink, but primarily it was just the memory of him as a kid, I guess, that he was so big.
Do you
Prince
remember?
of a guy.
What's that?
A prince of a guy.
Do you remember them ever talking about their lives when they were growing up, or
Never,
what it was like?
Never, never.
Were there any stories that they ever told?
They never told. The only stories that they ever told was about my granddad. He worked on the railroad, building railroads, running out of Fresno, a team of horses in Fresno, and he worked 12 hours a day and more. For lunch, he wanted 1 dozen eggs with mashed potatoes. One batch of mashed potatoes, 1 egg, 1 potato, 1 egg. My grandmother said one day she only had 11 eggs, and she heard about it for a week.
Who's the oldest person you can remember in your family as a child?
As a child, my granddad.
Really? Same guy, the big mammoth of a guy?
Yeah, but he wasn't that big yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's the oldest one.
Do you ever remember your family discussing any world events or
My
politics? or
family
anything
didn't
like that?
discuss politics nor world events. They were quite uncommunicative in
Really?
any area, yeah. They never. In fact, my mother, I never knew anything about her childhood or upbringing until after Gail and I were married. We were out in western Minnesota fishing, and I went out fishing with Roy and Dorothy and George. Gail stayed home talking to Mom, and Mom was telling her about her life and that she was a kid, swam across the Mississippi River in Dubuque, Iowa. I didn't even know she could swim. So, as I say, I didn't learn much about my family.
Now, Roy and Dorothy and George, who are all they again?
Roy was my stepdad,
Okay.
and Dorothy is a half-sister, and George was her husband.
Is Dorothy the one that lives in Wichita?
No, Dorothy lives, I don't know exactly where she lives now. She's out by Worthington, somewhere out there. The one that lives in Wichita is Margaret, who is a cousin. She's, 5, 6 years older, younger than me. Her husband just died. So, and she's very, very badly crippled up with arthritis. In fact, not just arthritis, with this thing that the women get, osteoporosis. She's bent over so she can't even raise her head.
Oh.
So I don't know what happened to her after her husband died. I haven't called her back, but that was just a week, 10 days ago. So
Is she the one that sold us the car that I had, that Maverick?
no, that was my sister-in-law. That was my brother Bill's wife
Mm-hmm.
that had the Maverick.
Okay. Well, let's take a break right quick. I'm going to... All right, let's try this again. Make sure the microphones are on.
It's on.
All right. Okay. Back to this one. What would you consider to be the most important inventions that have been made during your lifetime?
Most of you said inventions, the jet airplane and the computer.
And what about jet airplanes, do you remember?
I remember the first planes that I knew, jet that I knew about was during World War II when the Germans used to buzz the Americans. They'd go and make one pass at them and have to go back to base for more fuel because it took too much fuel to keep them in the air. But of course, after World War II, they became commercialized, and now you have jet airplanes all over the place.
Right. But it was the Germans that had them first?
The Germans flew the first jets, yeah,
Wow.
and they surprised the Americans with when they first flew them, yeah.
So I guess the Americans kind of felt like they needed to jump on that technology
Well,
pretty fast.
They did very, very fast.
Did
yeah.
that scare people?
I don't know. I don't know that much about what took place, but I know that the jet they really went to work on getting them in the air. So, and I say since then it's been all over the place. So,
How is the world different now than it was when you were a child?
A lot more complicated because of the drug situation, the stupid laws we have, the fact that if you spank your child, you're abusing him, which I don't believe that. But primarily the drugs and the race relations that supposedly are supposed to be getting better, but at times seem to be getting worse. So it was less complicated then than it is now.
Do you remember any tough times when you were growing up where there wasn't enough to go around?
No, living on a farm, we raised pigs, we raised cows. My mother raised chickens and ducks and turkeys. We always had plenty to eat. We had corn in the field, and we had sweet corn in season. We had apples in season, tomatoes in season. Can't say that I was ever hungry.
Is there anything you miss about being on the farm?
The peace and quiet, yeah. The lack of a telephone was one of the best things that ever happened.
Really? When we were talking about inventions, how about the telephone? I mean,
well, that's a great invention. We never had a telephone on the farm at home, but people that did were generally on party lines where every time somebody called a neighbor, all the other neighbors were on the line listening. So
I'm pretty sure the telephone was invented before you were born, right?
I think so. I'm not sure when the telephone was invented. I have to look it up in the World Book. But
of course, they didn't have answering machines and voicemail.
Oh, no.
Do you remember the first time you encountered an answering machine?
It didn't make much of an impression on me, I guess, if I did.
I just know I remember myself answering machines. It was just weird to talk to a machine.
Still weird to talk to a machine, but
yeah.
Fax machines are the most fascinating one because you can send messages, and actually you can send legal messages by fax machine, which is quite an improvement.
Yeah? Well, what did you have to do before?
Well, you either had to mail things to people and have them mail it back, or sit down in person and sign things. But now you can have them signed, and fax copy is a legal thing.
Now, when you were a child, what were your favorite games that you played?
Favorite games were primarily card games, checkers, and softball, and in the field or in school, that sort of stuff.
What kinds of card games do you remember playing?
We used to play whist. We used to play euchre. I couldn't play either one of them right now. I think that's primarily the ones that we played most of. Rummy, of course.
What are your favorite card games now?
Black Queen, Hand and Foot. Those are the two that we play primarily, and then of course we play a lot of checkers.
I remember
not checkers, dominoes.
Oh, okay.
Dominoes.
You taught me how to play Russian Bank.
Russian Bank, yeah. That's one that Gail and I play when we're traveling.
Really?
Because it's a good two-person game. It's a lot of fun and keeps your brain working a little bit.
I think you also taught me how to play cribbage.
Yeah, probably did.
On that huge cribbage board.
Right. It's hanging right around the corner there.
Is it?
Yeah.
I love that cribbage board.
That's something I play with Dave and Chuck when we get together.
Now, when you were in school, what were your schools like?
Well, my first school was a one-room school located about a quarter of a mile from the house. And we used to have to go down the driveway and down the street and back into the school. The fun part was to go over the fence, and it was a lot closer, but my mother was a little bit put out when we would do that, especially when I went over the fence with a brand new pair of pants on and ripped from one end to the other. That made her very unhappy.
I can't imagine why.
I can't either, but she was funny that way. But sweet gal, but boy, she was funny on things.
So, let's see, you walked to school?
We walked to school.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever get a ride to school?
The second school that we went to was when we moved. We were moved to a mile from school, so we walked to school then. Then we moved to another farm where we 4 miles from school.
Is this all the same school?
No.
This is different schools.
The second school was a school in town. The third school, I went back to the one-room school.
What town was that?
That was in Brampton, North Dakota.
That was the first one?
That was the first school I went to in town, yeah.
And then the second one was?
And the second school in town was at Cogswell.
Cogswell?
Yeah. But that was the fourth school that I went to. And that was 2 miles from home, and again we walked to school.
Was that one a one-room schoolhouse?
No, that was a kindergarten through high school.
Wow.
And that was torn down about, it would have been sometime in the 70s. And it's now, the land is now a park.
So how many different schools did you go to total?
4.
4? And
Well, I went to 3, but one twice, so that makes 4.
Oh, okay. So what were their names again, in order?
Well, the one was Sargent County School. The other one was Brampton School. Back to Sargent County School, and then to the Cogswell Public.
Okay. What was your favorite subject in school?
Recess.
Recess?
Yeah.
I think just about every kid says that. Recess or gym.
I can't really say that I had any favorite in school. Probably history would probably be my most interesting one. History, and I kind of liked English, but don't use it too well, but I liked it.
Which subject was your favorite one?
Which one?
Yeah.
History.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which one was the easiest for you? That's what I meant to say.
Easiest was recess, really.
Yeah.
I can't really say that I had any favorite or any easy one.
Do you remember one that was particularly hard for you?
Yeah, Latin. And
You had to take Latin?
Latin was a required subject in North Dakota at that time, which would be 70 years ago. Required if you wanted to go on to college. You had to take Latin. And I could not get Latin in my head. And I took, I think, about 1 month of Latin. And I was taking 5 subjects that year, and I just folded up my book and I laid it down and I went to my history book. The teacher says, "You're supposed to be studying Latin in here." I said, "I ain't taking Latin." She says, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I ain't." And I didn't. But I had my 4 subjects, so that's all I needed for the year anyway.
So you'd probably say Latin was your least favorite.
Absolutely my least favorite. I don't understand one bit of it.
Do you remember a favorite teacher?
Yeah, I do. She was a little redhead, and she tried to get me to learn more. And she was a nice lady. I saw her. This was back in what, 1987. I went out to the 100th anniversary of the town that I lived in, out to Cogswell. They had a, of course, big to-do going over the 100th anniversary. And I saw her and I told her, I said, "You know, you were my most favorite teacher."
What was her name?
She didn't remember me. So.
What was her name?
Iverson. Harriet Iverson.
Harriet Iverson. And she didn't remember you.
No, she didn't. Well, I
Well,
guess
she
I can
probably
see
had-
why.
Yeah, she probably had so many students. What about fellow classmates? How do they remember you best?
Very few of them remember. Well, they remember when I go back there, but I had no association with any of them after I left there. So.
Did you have any extra activities or sports or anything that you did?
Pitch hay.
Pitch hay?
Mm-hmm. Living on a farm, we worked 7 days a week. Everyone went to church. Us kids Bill and I would take off and go to church, but then get back home or back on the farm again. So very seldom do we have any time off, even on Sundays.
Wow.
That was back in the Depression days when everybody was working for a living.
You and Bill went to church.
Occasionally, but that was when we lived by Brampton, when we had a mile to go to town to go to church. The rest of the time we didn't go to church.
How many years of schooling did you complete?
Pardon?
How many years of schooling did you complete?
I had high school,
Mm-hmm.
but and then commercial schooling after that. Nothing, no diplomas or, what do you call them? No MBA or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But you finished high school?
I finished high school after World War II.
Okay.
I had quit school before that. After World War II, I finished high school and then went to business school
Where was your business school?
in Minneapolis. I took up traffic management and worked as an assistant traffic manager and traffic manager for a while, and then I went into personnel work and into shipping and receiving and sales, retail sales, and eventually into door-to-door sales, and then into accounting.
What is traffic management?
It was managing shipments of goods either by rail or by truck or by boat or
Oh, okay.
by air.
So it's not like on the street corner
No,
directing traffic.
No, the cops do that.
Yeah. We got a couple more questions left on school. Did you get good grades in school?
Good grades, average.
Yeah.
My
Were you happy with it?
my last year in school, I got top grades, but I was older at that time and settled down.
More important.
Right.
I understand that. So overall, did you like school?
Can't say that I liked it. I can't say I disliked it.
It was just school.
It was just school, right? Just something had to be. I think it's one of the most important things kids can have, but nobody told me that when I was going to school. So in fact, my stepdad said, "You don't need education, you're going to be a farmer." I said, "Well, that may be, but I ain't going to be a farmer."
It may be that you don't need education, but you're
Right.
not going to be a farmer.
Right.
Why didn't you want to be a farmer?
Well, I just wouldn't want to be a farmer. The hours, the uncertainty of what's going to happen, you're not in control of your life. The weather is.
Mm. Well, switching gears here a little bit. How old were you when you started dating?
When I started dating, I was probably 17.
17? Do you remember your first date?
My first date? Yeah, I suppose I do. I don't know if you'd call it their date or not, but my aunt took the gal next door and myself, she and her boyfriend took us down to see Cab Calloway and dropped us there, and from there on we went to see Cab Calloway and went home.
Where did you see him?
Where?
Yeah.
One of the theaters in Minneapolis, whether it was a State or which one, I don't remember now, but one of the theaters on Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis.
Now, you grew up on that farm in South Dakota.
North Dakota.
Or North Dakota.
North Dakota.
How did you end up in Minneapolis?
Well, because I migrated from North Dakota to Minneapolis. I left home when before I finished school, and came to Minneapolis and lived there I stayed with an aunt and uncle, and worked at B.F. Nelson's, paid my rent there, and that's where I stayed until I went in the service.
Now, how old were you when you left?
When I left home, I was about 16 and a half.
And how did you get from South Dakota to Minneapolis?
I left North Dakota. Not South
Or
Dakota.
North Dakota. Why do I keep saying South Dakota?
I left one night. It's about 5:30 at night, 6 o'clock at night, and I walked to Foreman, North Dakota, and it was dark. I was looking for a place to sleep. I went out to the fairgrounds. Was in one of the sheds looking for a place to lay down, and some guy shined a light on me. Said, "What are you doing in here?" I said, "I'm looking for a place to sleep." So he questioned me who I was and all that. He says, "You come with me." He took me up to his house, said, "There's a cot in the corner. You go lay there and go to sleep in the morning, get up and go." So I spent my first night actually under control of a policeman.
He was a policeman?
Oh yeah, he was his town constable.
Oh wow. Did you ever know his name?
Never knew his name. Never knew his name. But the next morning I got up and went down, and when the train went through, I hopped the freight and took off.
Wow. Did you do the whole thing like hopping on a moving train? And
No, not a movie. It was stalled. I hopped into a boxcar.
did you know where it was going?
I knew it was heading toward Minneapolis.
So you just
Yes.
knew the general direction.
That's all. That's
Huh.
all. Yeah.
And how long of a ride was that?
Well, we went as far as Hankinson, and of course there they changed trains. So, like a couple days later, or the next day sometime, I got on another train into Minneapolis. I came in Minneapolis at night, about probably 10 o'clock at night, and we came into the North Shore Yards, I think North Shore, whatever it is up north. Then a light shines in this boxcar. I said, "You, come out of here." And I come out, here's the yard police. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "To Minneapolis." He said, "Well, there's the way, get." And I got. So I got to where I could find a streetcar, and I got on a streetcar and went down to my aunt and uncle's place.
Wow. Had anyone known that you left?
My mother did.
Yeah.
I told her I was leaving and don't come after me,
Why were you leaving?
because of 3 little brats that got all the favors and were able to do what they wanted to do and tell me what I was going to do, and ain't nobody tell me what I'm going to do.
So 16 and a half.
Yeah.
Well, how long did it take you to get there again? To
To
Minneapolis?
Minneapolis, about 2 days.
What did you do for food?
Well, I think I had 15 cents in my pocket. I get a roll here, and actually I don't remember even eating on the way out here.
Wow.
So,
You've been pretty much in Minneapolis ever since then.
yeah, I spent.
Well, and spent some time in Rochester.
Well, yeah, that's. But I spent 9 months in Illinois with my dad, and again I left there and came back by train. I went down by train and came back by train in the boxcars.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow. How old were you when you did that?
17 and a half.
So a year later, you went down to Illinois to visit your dad.
Well, it was probably 6 months later I went down there, and I was down there about 9 months when I left there.
Had you met your dad before?
I met my dad after I was here in Minneapolis. What are you doing there?
A little spider.
My dad worked on a USS Wake Robin, which is a lighthouse tender. Going up and down the Mississippi, they took care of these buoys, lights and the buoys. And I met him then, and the next time he came up, he wanted me to go down with him down to his place, which I did later that year. And then I stayed there for part of a year and came back up. And I've been in Minneapolis since then.
What was your dad's name?
Charlie
Charlie.
Fiedler.
But what was his full name?
I have no Charlie Joseph or Charles Joseph or Carl Joseph. I don't know which actually was correct, but that was Charles Joseph Fiedler.
So you might have been named after your dad.
No,
No?
if I'm not a junior.
Oh, okay.
See,
Well, I know, but I mean
yeah.
the Charles part.
It could be. I don't know. Nobody ever told me.
So that first date that you had, what was her name?
So what?
The first date that we started talking about before?
Ruth.
Ruth?
Yeah.
Do you remember her last name?
It was Minx at the time. No, it wasn't Minx. Ruth. She married a Minx. I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Where did you meet her?
She was the niece of my next door neighbor when I was living with Pete and Laura.
Pete and Laura were your aunt and uncle?
Yeah.
And they were, one of them was your mom's brother or sister?
Laura was my mother's sister, yeah.
Your mother's sister? Do you remember a good friend or name a good friend that you've known for the longest period of time?
A good friend that I've known for the longest period of time would have to be people that I've known. Good friends after I started going to First Covenant Church, about in the 70s sometime. So we have a number of good friends that have known Gail all their lives, but didn't know me until I came down there.
Now, Grandma Marge, how did you meet her?
How did I meet her?
Mm-hmm.
I met her through Ruth.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
The girl that was your first date.
Right. I had appendix operation. I was in Northwestern Hospital. And I was in Fairview Hospital. And Ruth brought Marge up. She told Marge, she says, I'm going to introduce him, but don't you get any ideas. So, of course, I was always kind of a smart-mouthed kid.
No.
Telling a few jokes and stuff, and Marge says, I don't want anything to do with him. But yet she married me. So anyway, that's where it goes.
So that's your earliest memory of her?
Marge?
Yeah.
That's how I met her, in the hospital.
And you were in for an
I had
appendix?
an appendix operation, yeah.
Were you having it removed, or?
It was already gone.
Oh, really?
I had it taken out, yeah.
How old were you?
17,
Okay.
18 maybe.
Wow. Now, do you remember your first date with Grandma?
Not really. I don't remember where we went on our first date. I know that she was living with her aunt and uncle over on 22nd Avenue, and I used to have to go over to get her. And at that time, the railroad line ran across Franklin Avenue, and you had to cross Franklin Avenue in order to get to see her. Every time you went over there, there was a train there, so you spend at least a half an hour getting to and from. So, but that's, I used to go over and get her, and we'd go out and go to movies or whatnot.
What do you remember as being some of your favorite dates?
Hmm?
Do you remember any of your favorite dates? Most
Any
memorable?
date with her was a favorite.
Aw.
Any date with her was a favorite. No. We had a lot of fun together. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman.
Now, how long did you know her before you got married?
3 years.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Describe your wedding proposal.
I don't know. I was in the service. I think I wrote and asked her if she wanted to come down and marry me. I was down in Springfield, Illinois at that time. in
How
the
old were
service.
you?
At that time, I would have been about not quite 22. I went in the service on my 21st birthday.
So you proposed to her through a letter.
I think so. I don't really recall.
When and where did you get married?
I got married in Springfield, Illinois, and December 5th, 1942.
Wow. What was your wedding ceremony like?
There was a pastor and his wife, and Marge and I,
Where were you?
in a church in Springfield, Illinois.
So it's just the four of you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you were in the service at the time. So did you have to go, I mean, did you two live on base somewhere or?
In church in town. You could go in, get a license, and
No, I mean, after you were married, where did you live?
well, after we were married, she came back to Minneapolis, and I was transferred down to Longview, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And she came down there, and we had an apartment off base while I was there. Then I was transferred from there. We went overseas, and she came back to Minneapolis.
When you were overseas?
Hmm?
When you went overseas and she went back to
She
Minneapolis?
came back to Minneapolis, yeah.
She go back to Minneapolis right away?
Within a couple of weeks, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Chuck was born. We were transferred, I think, the 11th of August, something like that, and Chuck was born the 19th, and she came back shortly after that. She came back to Minneapolis.
You know, I missed a question here. Did you have a honeymoon?
Not really. Not really.
How would you describe Grandma? What did you admire about her most?
Her strength, her character, her ability to think things through and to do things. Just a wonderful woman. Yeah, a wonderful woman.
Yeah.
God's blessed me with two wonderful women.
Speaking of two wonderful women, how did you meet Grandma Gail?
Well, she came back to First Covenant Church. She'd been gone for quite a few years. She had married, and her husband was a Lutheran and insisted they go to a Lutheran church. After he died, that was probably, I think, 15 years before that, or 10, 15 years. She came back she'd had Bible studies with some of the gals in the neighborhood who were all First Covenant girls, and they talked her into coming back there. Well, she came back to First Covenant Church a year or 2 years before Grandma died. And she would go out to dinner with us and a group of us like we do now. There's a bunch of us go out. She was one of the single gals. Another single gal was a cousin of one of the other people. We'd go out to dinner. So we met her that way, or I met her that way. And she'd been to the house for parties at different times, so that's how I knew her. And after Grandma died, we just kept going out to dinner, and someday we said we wanted to go out together, so we did.
Did you have an official date?
Well,
I mean, like the first time you decided to go out on a date?
well, we just went to a movie. I didn't call it a date at that time. It was just to go out together.
Yeah.
Because we'd been going out to dinner all the time, together.
Did you have a wedding proposal with Gail?
I
Do you
just said,
remember?
"Will you marry me?" She says, "I don't know."
She said, I don't know.
It took her some while to get around to it. Of course, she was afraid that I would compare her to Marge, which, as I said, they're two wonderful women. What's to compare?
Yeah.
Both got a lot of strength, a lot of character,
I agree.
the ability to think things through, and the ability to, just everything.
Where did you get married?
At 1921 Elliott Avenue South, in the home that she was born in.
In the home she was born in. Wow. Who was living there at the time?
Her sister Marge and Phyllis.
Okay.
That's where we were married.
Who all was there?
Well, at the wedding was Phyllis, Marge, and Lorraine, and Merle, and of course all of her kids. And Chuck and Dave were there. Of course, the preacher.
That's a useful one.
That's a useful one, yeah. And friends that sang. That's about it. But then we had, right afterwards, we had the reception, and 3/4 of the church came to that.
Oh, wow.
People that, relatives of Marge's and relatives of Gail's. So we had a big bunch of people there.
Wow. Did you have a honeymoon?
Never ending.
So, how long were you married to Grandma Marge?
44 years and almost 45 years.
Almost 45 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And now how long have you been married to Grandma Gail?
It's over 14.
Over 14.
We were
Wow.
married in 87. And this was 01, so.
Wow. What wise advice would you give to a grandchild or great-grandchild on their wedding day?
What wise advice? Treat her with respect. Tell her daily that you love her many times. Be honest and above board in all cases. And I think that would cover the field.
Yeah. You want to take a break or you want to keep on going?
It's up to you. Depends on what you're going to get.
Joe,
Yeah.
so long, you put it in laundry.
Okay. All right. I took care of that telephone.
Before we go any further, I want to back up to their last question. The sage advice to a grandson.
Right, yes.
Put the potty seat down.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Now that we got that on tape.
Right.
All right, here's some fun stuff. How did you find out that you were going to be a parent for the first time?
By V-mail.
V-mail?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
It's victory mail during World War II. It's a form that was lightweight and easy to send. It's not email, but V-mail, victory mail.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I found out.
Was that like a postcard?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. That's when I found out I was a parent. When I found out I was going to be a parent was a telephone call to Marge when she was back in Minneapolis.
Do you remember what she said?
She was going to have a baby.
Oh. Do you remember how you felt?
Felt great. Yeah.
What about with Dave? Do you remember finding out about when she was pregnant with him?
She just went to the doctor and came home and said she was pregnant.
And you were already home by then, right?
Oh yeah, I was home then, yeah. I was home for 2 years before that. No, not that long. About a year before Dave was born.
Now the V-mail thing, when Chuck was born,
Mm-hmm.
you found out that he was born over this
Yeah.
V-mail.
Right. About 18 days, 19 days after he was born.
Oh, wow.
It took that long to get mail over there.
He was already a couple weeks old.
Oh yeah, it took that long to get mail overseas at that time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was over in Africa at the time.
And there wasn't any way to make a phone call or anything like that?
Oh, during the World War II, you didn't make phone calls.
Wow.
It was, and your mail was censored. Every piece of mail that was read by somebody before it went out.
It was censored, so you're lucky you got the word boy on your V-mail.
Yeah. No, it was always, everything was censored, both coming and going during the war.
Now, had you decided on any names? If it was going to be a boy or a girl?
No,
Or
pretty
did she-
much, yeah.
Yeah.
She wanted to name him Junior, so
Yeah.
we did.
Do you remember having a girl name picked up?
Not really.
No?
Mm.
So now you've had 3 children altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck, Dave, and my mom, Diane.
Right.
And their full names are...
Charles Albert Fiedler, Jr.,
Mhm.
David Lee Fiedler, Diane Louise Fiedler,
Mhm.
now Moss.
Mhm. Now, when was each one of them born? Do you remember?
Chuck was born August 19th, 1943. 43? Yeah. Dave was born July 3rd, 1947. And your mother was born June 28th, 1950.
And where were they all born?
Chuck was born in the hospital in Texas, in Longview, Texas. Dave was born in Swedish hospital, and your mother was born in the Swedish hospital in Minneapolis,
In Minneapolis? Now, why was Chuck born in Longview?
because that's where his mother was when he was born.
Well, I know, but I thought she went back to Minneapolis after you.
Well, she came back down to Longview after she knew she was pregnant. She came down there, and we had an apartment in Longview.
Okay.
That was the base where I was working from.
Mhm. Okay. So she came down there, why? Because of the medical benefits, or?
No, just to be with me.
I thought you were overseas.
No, I was in Longview, Texas until I went overseas. I was in Longview until sometime in August, first part of August in 1943.
Okay.
And then we went overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I may have some of these dates wrong, but it was August, because Chuck was born the 19th of August. And we were going overseas at that time.
So you were in Longview when you found out over the phone that she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went over, then she came down,
Mm-hmm.
and then you went overseas.
Right.
And while you were overseas is when you got the mail
That he
Chuck
was born. Right, right,
18 days ago.
right, right, right.
Oh, wow. I bet you were just jumping up and down,
Yeah,
all excited,
that's right.
showing everybody your V-mail.
Right. And as always with the first kid, there's probably 6,000 pictures. The second kid gets maybe
6?
100, and the third one gets probably 20 at the most.
Yeah. The third one being my mother.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Hmm. Let's see.
You haven't got that thing hooked up.
That's for
Oh.
the monitor.
Okay.
Do you remember any funny things that the kids did?
Funny things what?
Do you remember any funny things that any of the kids did when you were growing up? When they were growing up? Did or said?
Yeah. See, Chuck would have been what? Probably 6. Dave was about 3, 2. Anyway, Marge was giving him a hard time, and Chuck said, "I'm going to run away. I'm going to choose another mommy." And,
Choose another mommy?
Dave says, "Shucky, don't choose Shimmy's crabby old mommy."
don't choose Jimmy's crabby old
Yeah. Don't choose Jimmy's crabby old mommy.
mommy? That's funny.
Yeah.
How old were they again?
Well, I don't think your mother was born, so Dave may have been 3. Chuck would have been 7 then, at that time. No, he wasn't 7 because he was. He might have been. I don't know. Anyway, they were kids.
Yeah. Remember anything funny that my mom ever said or did?
Not really, not offhand.
No? If you had it to do all over again, what would you change the way that you raised your family?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I don't think I did anything that horrible. I don't think I did anything that great, but they all turned out good.
What
Thanks to their mother. More than their father.
Why do you say that?
Well, because she spent more time with them than I did. She was more gentle with them than I was.
You don't think you were very gentle?
Sometimes I don't think I was, but they haven't complained about it. None of them are carrying any broken bones because of it. So, but she was just one heck of a good mother. That's all.
What did you find most difficult about raising children?
Not having enough money and time to do what I'd like to do with them. I never had the money to, take the vacations I'd like to and do the things that I like to, but we got by. But that was considerably different times than they are today. People didn't have the money that they have today.
Yeah. What about time?
I spent probably a good amount of time with them because I was working jobs that I had Sundays off. I generally worked Saturday, but I had one day off during the week, and then I was generally home by 6 o'clock at night, 5:36.
What did you find most rewarding about raising children?
The fact that they turned out good. It's about the only thing that the reward you got is that None of them have got jail records, and none of them are druggies. All of them have got good jobs, good families. What more can you ask?
Would you say that you were strict or lenient?
I was rather strict, more strict than their mother.
Really?
I think so. I had a look that could stop them right cold in their tracks.
I've seen that look.
You have?
Yes. I remember it growing up. It
Yeah.
looked very practiced.
Yeah.
Tried and true.
As one of the guys said in the Army, when he's got that look on his face, don't argue, just do it.
How did you first hear that you were going to be a grandparent?
Telephone call.
Yeah. Who was your first? Trey was your first.
Trey was the
grandchild?
first one, yeah. They were in, Chuck was in the service in the east somewhere, I don't know where.
Now, besides making sure to put the toilet seat down, what kind of sage advice do you have for grandchildren in general?
Well, that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, especially if you have any brothers, sisters, or a
Right.
wife.
Especially a wife or sisters.
Yeah.
The sage advice would be to treat each other with respect. Kids are bound to tease, but there's a limit to teasing. I think respect is the most important thing. Treat others as you want to be treated.
Back to your childhood. What did you want to be when you grew up?
What did I want to be when I grew up?
You already said you didn't want to be a farmer.
Right. I don't know that I really had too much of a hankering to be anything. Probably a railroad man.
Really?
But I never worked on the railroad.
But I bet you enjoyed riding the trains.
Boxcars, yeah.
Except when you got caught.
Yeah. The last two train rides that I had on traveling, neither one of them were very good experiences. We went out to North Dakota for Christmas, I think it was, or Thanksgiving. And there was Dave and Chuck and Marge and me. And that was right after World War II. I don't think Dave was there, no, it was just Chuck and Marge and I. And we were the only passengers in this whole passenger car. They had a little bit of stove about 8 inches around and sitting in one corner of the car, and that's the heat in the place.
Oh my
And it
goodness.
was cold, and the wind was blowing just horribly, and it was 30 to 40 degrees below zero. And the train would every once in a while would stop, steam up, and then take off again. And it took us 13 hours to go from here to Hankinson. And now that you can make in 3 hours in a car. So you can see what kind of weather that was. And then the next trip was down to see my brother down in Illinois, and this was right after the war. And the trains were just crowded like you wouldn't believe. And it was July or August, and hotter than blazes. We leave Minneapolis. Between Minneapolis and St. Paul, the air conditioning went out in the car that we were in. They didn't get it fixed until they got down to, well, the next station out of Keokuk, Iowa, this way was in Iowa, anyway, clear down in Iowa before they got the air conditioning fixed. And that was a miserable ride.
What was your first job?
My first job was working for B.F. Nelson's,
What did you do for them?
shipping and receiving.
How old were you?
I was 17, I think, when I went to work for him.
Was that when you first got here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were living with your aunt and uncle at the time. Now, I haven't heard of B.F. Nelson's. What do they do?
They're out of business. They were a roofing manufacturer, roofing and siding manufacturer. Their last plant was out in Eden Prairie, but that's gone now too. So
How'd you get that job?
well, that's what Pete worked for.
Oh, okay.
So I went worked there.
You just got your job down there?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I'd been better off if I'd have been working somewhere else, I think, but that was awfully hard work.
Yeah. Kept you in shape?
Well, I suppose you did, yeah. Didn't kill me anyway.
What kinds of jobs have you had?
What kind of jobs did I have?
What kinds of jobs have you had over the years?
Well, I've done everything from shipping and receiving to purchasing to retail sales, wholesale sales, and accounting, which I'm still doing a little bit of. So I run the gamut. I did personnel work, office management, traffic management.
What was a typical work day in some of your jobs? I mean, did you work a 40-hour week or?
Primarily, yeah.
Yeah.
Other than when I was in direct selling, then I worked probably 50 hours, 60 hours a week.
Wow. Were you on the road?
No,
No.
part of the time I was, but I was out ringing doorbells.
Wow. How old were your kids at that time?
When I first started world booking, Dave was a sophomore in high school, and that's when we moved to Rochester. And was he a sophomore? Yeah, he was a sophomore.
So Chuck was already.
Chuck was already married and in service.
Wow.
So,
And then I would make my mom in what, junior high?
yeah. Yeah.
I remember at one point you telling me about, we were talking about job stress and stress that people have in their jobs. And you told me that you had an interesting way of keeping the stress of your job out of your house.
The thing to do is when you leave your place of work, you have a nail on the wall. You take your problems, you hang them there, and you leave them there, and you go home without them. You pick them up when you go in if you want to take them back, if they're worth taking back. Most of the time they're gone by the time you get there anyways.
Did that always work for you?
Primarily, I think, yeah. I wasn't one that had to go to the liquor store and have a drink on the way home to take care of my stress. I leave it at work.
What were the hardest choices you ever had to make?
Hardest choices? I think that's yet to come.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever had any choice that was that particularly difficult. Let life flow the way it goes.
Name a person that's had the most positive influence on you in your entire life.
Most positive influence. Probably your grandmother.
Why is that?
Just the type of person she was. Just the type of person she was, that's all I can say.
Well, let's switch gears here a little bit.
Hmm?
We'll switch gears. Some different topics here. How would you describe yourself politically?
Radical.
Radical?
I am definitely a independent Republican and radical to the core.
Okay, how do you define radical? Because I don't think of you as all that radical.
Well, I don't agree with a lot of things that are said, and I'm not afraid to say that I don't agree with it.
And that makes you radical?
Well, in a lot of people's eyes it would, yeah.
Yeah.
I write and tell them what I think they're doing wrong, and if they don't like it, that's tough.
What kinds of things have you written in about?
Well, various things on what's happening with welfare, what's happening with many of the things that go on. People like Lieberman, he's a chameleon. He was one thing before he became a vice president. He had all kinds of good ideas, but they're all completely different now, and he's on the complete opposite side of the fence.
Even before he became vice president candidate?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. What wars have been fought during your lifetime?
Well, major wars were the World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and then jillions of minor wars.
Right. Now, those wars, what was your overall view of each one of those?
Well, World War II was forced upon us, which probably could have been avoided had somebody had guts enough earlier and a sense enough earlier to stop Hitler before it became what it was. The Korean War, I'm not that conversant with that, nor with the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War we should never have been into, because we didn't go in there to win, and that's the whole problem.
Now, you served in the Army, right?
Mm-hmm.
What years did you serve?
From 41 to 45.
41 to 45. What was your position and duties?
My position was, I left as a tech sergeant, and my duties was the supply, personal supply.
Supply. What countries were you in?
What countries? It was in Africa and Italy.
And that was all during World War II?
Yeah.
Had the war started when you got in?
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
said you were in 41. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you volunteer?
I volunteered for the Air Force, I volunteered for the Navy, and I figured if they don't want me, I ain't worth taking. But then I got drafted.
Oh, you got drafted for the
Yeah.
Army?
Right, right.
So you didn't want to do Army, but you volunteered for the other ones?
Yep.
So, Italy and Africa. What parts of... I mean, Africa is a huge continent. What part were you
This was North Africa. It was Iran. We were in Iran, Algeria.
Is that desert area?
No, not, well, it is farther south, but up where we were primarily on the coast,
Mm-hmm.
the coastal area. And we went from there into Italy.
Did you ever see any combat?
Could see combat from sitting up in the upper stories of the bombed out paratrooper station we were stationed in. You could sit up there and see firing up in the hills. They almost broke through. And had they broken through, I would have been a POW,
Wow.
because I was cadre to stay with the patients that were not movable, but they never broke through, so it never happened.
So since you didn't see any frontline combat, you were never injured or anything?
No.
What U.S. president have you admired the most and why?
Well, Reagan, for one. Actually, even though he was a Democrat, Roosevelt. Roosevelt, I think, did a terrific job of pulling the country out of depression. Reagan, at the time Reagan went in, we had interest rates of 18% and better, which he brought down and actually got the economy going to what we had the last few years that Bill Clinton screwed all up, and why right now it was on the decline when he was there, but George Bush is getting blamed for it.
Is there anything else about Reagan or Roosevelt that you really like?
Well, they were both statesmen, which you can't say that about most of the politicians today. I think Bush is. I really do. Clinton was nothing but a scoundrel all the way through. A liar, a cheat, an egotist. This is all on tape. I don't care. That's what he is.
You gotta say it like it is.
That's right. Yep. But let's say this for Clinton. He felt your pain. He gave it to you too.
As you see it, what are the biggest problems that face our nation, and how could they be solved?
The biggest problems that face our nation is that we do not have statesmen, we have politicians. Politicians are interested in one thing: the party, the party, the party, and what I can get out of them. And that's the thing that, to me, is the biggest problem with our nation today.
So it's our leaders?
The leaders, the leadership. And also, the next biggest problem is your race relationships, which I don't understand why people take the attitude. We had over here at the Capitol yesterday, this KKK meeting. That shouldn't even be allowed when you have those type of people. But, I mean, again, you can't stop them, because if you do, then you're a racist. So, but those are the two big problems in the world today, as I see it.
Wow. Let's go to some lighter topics. How tall are you?
Well, as of now, I'm about 5 feet 7 3/4. I was 5 feet 8 and I was actually 5 feet 9 1/2 at one point. I shrunk. Well, you will too, so don't go at me.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. What color was your hair as a young child?
About the color it is now, whatever color you want to call that, other than gray.
So it was kind of a dark brown?
Dark brown, yeah. Brown.
What color are your eyes?
Hazel.
Where have you lived as an adult?
Where have I lived?
Yeah, the places and the years that you lived in each one.
I lived in North Dakota. I was born in Wisconsin, lived in North Dakota, Minnesota. If you want to call it, I lived in Africa and I lived in Italy. And,
What about the houses that you've lived in?
when I came back, the first house that I owned in Minneapolis was out on Sheridan Avenue South. Then we moved over on Crocker Avenue, and then we moved to Rochester, then we moved back to West 43rd Street, and then I moved here.
So why are you living here? Why did you move here?
Why did I move here? I had to have a place to live.
That's always a good reason.
Yeah. This is a place that Gail and I bought together after we got married.
It's a beautiful place.
In fact, we bought it before we got married. I moved here before we got married.
If you could live anywhere in the world that you wanted to live, where would you want to live?
Well, I'd have to say two places, Minnesota and Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ever going to move to Florida?
Not full time, no.
No.
We might eventually go down there for 6 months out of the year, something like that.
Describe your general health.
Excellent. I have no complaints. I can't say I have no complaints. I have aging, that the joints get stiff and that sort of stuff. Beyond that, I'm very, very good health.
Do you ever remember having any major illnesses or health problems over the years?
I had appendicitis and I had ruptures. Other than that, no problems.
I remember you had several hernia surgeries.
Right.
I remember that when I was growing up.
Yeah. That was the worst part of the whole thing, was it hernia surgery.
Now, do you exercise regularly?
I do some stretching and, of course, take care of the lawn, which is,
That's exercise.
and shovel snow, and not shovel snow, but blow snow. I don't do any major exercise, no.
You ever had any bad habits?
Smoking and drinking
When was that?
before I quit.
That's great.
Before I went into service, I did quite a bit of drinking and quite a bit of smoking. And I smoked all the time I was in the service until just before I got on the boat coming home. I quit, but I didn't continue quitting until later. But in 1945, I quit drinking, quit smoking, and haven't had anything to drink or smoke since then.
So you quit everything shortly after you got back?
Yep. I was on the way to be an alcoholic,
Were you?
and I said, God, I don't need this, and I need help. And I quit. That's it. No smoking, no drinking.
That's great. So you realized that you couldn't do it without God.
That's right. No, my dad was an alcoholic, and Roy was an alcoholic, and I didn't want any part of it. But I was heading that way badly.
Suppose you didn't want to have your kids go through the same sort of thing.
Hmm?
Suppose you didn't want to have your kids go through the same sort of thing that you did.
Nope, no way.
You ever been in any serious accidents?
Serious accident? No.
No.
I had a lot of accidents, but not what I call serious. I had a number of whiplashes from being hit, but awfully close to serious accidents. We were coming down to Texas and had a car going north. We were going south. And this car left the road, went down into the median and disappeared. And it came up out of the median and over into our lane. And I kicked off, if I was on cruise, I kicked off from cruise and just kept it rolling, probably 30, 35 miles, so I'd have some maneuverability. This car came down and stayed in our lane, and just before it hit us, there was probably 10 feet between us when I moved left, and that went down and down into the ditch, rubbed along a fence, went through the fence and into a ditch. The woman that was killed.
Oh my goodness.
But it was so close. I mean, again, the good Lord was with us because there was nobody driving that thing when it went by us. I couldn't see any driver.
Wow.
I mean, she was either dead at that point or she was passed out, one or the other. But she was stuck on cruise and was right on down along that fence. I told you about that, I thought, before. But
I vaguely remember that.
yeah.
Wow.
But that was the closest thing that we came to having a real bad accident.
Mm.
Gail was taking a nap at the time. It's just
But she doesn't remember a thing?
she didn't see any part of it, no, other than she saw the people stop behind us to go over. And,
So you stopped and went back and...
no, I didn't. I stopped, and there was enough people there. I said, I don't need to see this, and we just went on from there.
You ever been the victim of a crime?
Yeah, I had my car stolen once.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I had a 1937 Nash that, no, it was a 1940 Nash that had a toggle switch on for the switch. I had it parked in the garage, and I was using a neighbor's garage across the street. I had it parked in the garage, and I never locked the thing there. Nobody would steal that.
What's
So,
a Nash? I've never heard of that.
well, it's one of the extinct automobiles.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember the? Yeah. What the heck was it? I'll think of it after a while. Anyway,
Okay.
2 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from the police department. Where is your car? I said, it's in the garage. He said, you sure? I said, well, certainly I'm sure. I put it there last night. Where do you expect it to be? Well, he said, would you go look? Oh, I said, okay. I go over and look. There's no car there. So I come back. I said, well, it's not there. He said, well, you can come down to the impound lot and get it. He says, we have it. We have the 3 kids that stole it in custody. He says, your car's in the impound lot. The kids had stolen the car, and it had died out on 100, which is about 8 blocks away from where the garage was, and they came down. The neighbor had a car sitting in the driveway, and rather than mess with it there, they opened the door of the garage, and mine was there and available, and they're gone with it. So, but that makes you feel very violated.
I bet.
Uh,
I bet. How old were you?
How old was I? I don't know. It's about in around 54, 53.
Oh, so my mom was like 4 years old?
No. Yeah. She was. Yeah, that's about right, because we were living on Crocker Avenue.
Wow. Yeah, that would be a little unsettling.
It was.
It was just neighborhood kids?
No, I don't know where they were from.
Oh.
But the dumb kids stole my car, went down and parked across an alley downtown. And of course, when the alley was blocked, the cops were called, and the cops stood there, and the kids came out to get in the car, and they nailed them.
Has anyone ever saved your life?
Saved my life? Not that I know of.
Have you ever saved anyone else's life?
Not that I know of.
You ever been hospitalized?
Yeah, several times. For tonsillitis and hernia and appendicitis.
So, I guess were all of those surgeries?
Yep.
So you now have no tonsils, no appendix,
That's right. Don't want
no
them either.
hernias.
Yeah, I do have a hernia, but it
Oh,
ain't
do you
going to.
really?
But it's not going to get messed with unless it gets bad that it bothers me. Because I don't want any more surgeries.
Yeah. I had one of those. I
Yeah.
understand. If you could change something about yourself, what would it be?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty good the way I am.
Oh, I agree.
I don't know what I would want to change.
you ever dream?
Do I ever dream?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember them when I do.
Really?
Once in a while I get, a wild one that you'll remember, but otherwise I know I dream. Everybody dreams, but I don't remember.
Do you remember any of the wild ones that you remember? I mean, that you'd want to share.
Well, one that occurred a number of times, and why I don't know, but it was living in, I don't know where, but in hills, underground in hills, in these, there's supposedly like houses, but in hills. I've had that dream several times, not for many years, but that's about one that I remember. It was,
They were like underground houses?
yeah.
Huh.
And I don't know what that was all about, and don't have the dream anymore and don't want it.
What church do you attend?
First Covenant, Minneapolis.
How long have you been going there?
Since early 70s. So that would be over 30 years.
Describe your religious beliefs.
My religious belief, I believe that Christ died for me and that I'll be with him and you someday.
So, what do you believe happens to us when we die?
We walk through that tunnel and come face to face with our Savior. Our body goes in the ground.
Now, in the past, what was the most stressful experience you ever lived through?
Most stressful? I don't think I ever allowed stress to take over my life. I was unemployed at different times, but I wasn't stressed out about it. I knew eventually it would be there. I can't really say that I've had any stressful that I can...
How did you know eventually it would be there?
Because I just believed that it would be there. And you believe strong enough, it's going to be there.
You ever played any musical instruments?
No, as a kid, sitting on the prairie out in Dakota herding cows on horseback, I tried to learn to play the mouth organ, which my grandmother was very, very good at and wouldn't teach me. Of course, I can't read music and don't know music, but I tried to play the mouth organ and...
Mouth organ?
The mouth organ. Harmonica, yeah.
Okay.
The cows dried up, the bull left home, and I never did learn to play the mouth organ. And when I came back after World War II and walked in the stall where old Pat was standing, he laid his ears back and didn't even want to have anything to do with me. He'd listened to enough of my music.
Would you consider yourself creative?
Creative? No, not creative, but I can fix or do anything that anybody can make. I can, not creative, yes, in the terms of needing a third hand. There's very many ways in order to be able to do things alone, which is creativity. A good pair of clamps makes the best third hand you ever had.
What kinds of things have you made that others enjoy?
Well, I've made some furniture that a couple of people enjoy.
I personally remember some of it.
Yeah,
And still have it.
and still have it. But that's primarily it, furniture and stuff that you make that way.
I still have some stuff that you made for me 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. That one little cabinet in the hall there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's some in Dave's place that I made back in the 40s.
Wow. How would you describe your sense of humor?
Ridiculous.
I can't disagree with you. I just blame mine on you.
I have been blamed for so many things, Joe, that it really doesn't bother me.
Well, you know, a sense of humor isn't a bad thing to be blamed
That's
for.
right. That's true.
You ever played any practical jokes on anyone?
Many, many.
What's the funniest one that you've ever played?
Well, one of the nastiest ones is a wake-up call with a wet finger in the ear.
I remember that. Any others?
Probably, but I don't recall them, but that's...
What activities have you especially enjoyed as an adult?
Fishing, woodworking, just about everything, anything. I enjoy what I'm doing. I even enjoy mowing the lawn. I enjoy blowing snow. I'm nuts.
Sometimes it's good to be nuts. What's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I'll have to go back to dreams on that one. I used to sleep in a nightshirt. And for some reason, many times I'd wake up dreaming I was running through town with no clothes on. And I quit sleeping in nightshirts. But that's embarrassing.
Yeah, that would be. And it was always through town?
Well, running somewhere, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever met any famous people?
Famous people, yeah. Colson. He was the one of Nixon's top men that wound up in prison. He's a prison fellowship. Runs
Chuck
prison.
Colson?
Chuck Colson.
Oh, wow.
We got pictures of him
I
upstairs.
didn't know he was affiliated with Nixon.
Yeah, he was one of Nixon's right-hand men anyway. And I met the Sheik over in Africa. He was a friend of the colonel that ran our outfit, and I met him at different times. Other than that, other famous people, I can't think of who it might have been.
How'd you end up meeting these people?
Well, Colson, Gail worked with Christmas Tree. I think it's called Christmas Tree, where people will buy gifts for prisoners. And that was one of Colson's deals. And we went to a dinner a couple of different times where Colson had the dinners.
What organizations and groups have you belonged to?
I'm not a joiner.
No.
No, I can't say that I belong to any organization.
Besides your local church?
That's right. Yeah.
Have you ever won any special awards or prizes?
I won a car once,
Really? What kind?
a Plymouth Valiant, brand new, as a sales contest.
For what company?
World Book Encyclopedia.
That's right. You were like one of the top in the nation, weren't you?
I was at one time the top in the world.
In the world.
1 week fame is so fleeting.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow. Mom was telling me that she remembers you kind of teeter-tottering back and forth with another guy for top salesman, like on several occasions.
oh yeah, oh yeah. 'Cause I was top salesman in the district for the 10 years that I was in World Booking.
Wow.
The top one in the district.
So what was it about World Book that you were so good at selling
Just have a strong thumb.
it? To keep the door open?
Yeah. No, I got all my leads by pushing doorbells,
Ah.
and I spent a lot of time doing it.
And they give you a car for that.
I won in a sales contest. Yeah, I had the.
Great. Have you ever won anything else?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Card tables, that lamp over there,
Oh, really?
yeah, and lots and lots of stuff.
Huh.
I don't know whether it was your mother or Dave said, Dad doesn't make much money, but he sure wins a lot of things.
Do you enter a lot of contests, or?
No, it was all for working.
Oh, for work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They'd put in a sales contest, and I'd come out top dog on them. I had, in fact, I don't know if your mother still has a set, but I won 3 sets of dishes. So you came in a box this big, complete sets of dishes. I got one for Chuck, one for Dave, and one for your mother in a sales contest.
That's great. Describe a time and a place when you remember feeling truly at peace and happy to be alive.
Every day. Every day.
Now, you've traveled a lot
Not,
around the nation. I mean, a lot more than
Yeah.
quite a few people.
yeah,
Granted, it's been in the last few years.
yeah.
It's been the most. What's the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Probably Lake Louise
Where's that?
up in Canada. It's beautiful up there. It's beautiful in New York State. It's beautiful out western Minnesota. You've got country out there that you can't beat it for scenery. You get out into New York State and some of those mountains, especially upper New York in the fall when the leaves change, you can't beat it. You go up in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, the same thing. When the leaves change, you can't describe it. It's beautiful.
When did you go up to Lake Louise?
Hmm?
Was it Lake Louise?
Lake Louise, yeah.
When did you go up there?
Ooh, that would have been about 1990.
Okay. What's the longest trip you've ever gone on?
Longest trip I've ever done? From New York City to Africa.
New York City to Africa?
Yeah.
What about road trip?
The longest one I would say was when we went up through Lake Louise and out to the west coast and down into Washington, Oregon, and back through Yellowstone and that. That was the longest one we've been on. That was before we got involved in so many other things.
Now, the trip from New York to Africa, that was for the war, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you travel?
How did we travel? On the USS Alexander, which is a ship that was supposedly was sunk in World War II, and they salvaged it and were using it for a troop ship.
Was it just a big battleship?
No, it was just a big passenger ship, made into a troop ship. We had over 9,000 troops plus the crew of the ship going overseas.
Now, were you disguised as like a
No,
cruise ship?
we were in a convoy.
Oh, okay.
In a convoy. And just before we got to the Straits of Gibraltar, the Germans came over with a fleet of planes and they turned the whole convoy around and back out to sea for 2 days. And then they came back in.
Did you have air cover?
Well, they had some, yeah, but the air cover came from the
From the mainland?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any aircraft carriers or anything?
No carrier with us. I don't think. If it was far enough away that we couldn't see it because they weren't all clustered in one little group. They were scattered pretty good. So.
So what about submarines, U-boats, and all that? Were there any problems with that in your convoy?
We didn't have any on our convoy, no.
I suppose there was hundreds of convoys going over all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Well, how long did the war last?
Well, actually, we got into it, in either 39. 39, I think, we got into it.
Did we get in before or after Pearl Harbor?
We were involved in Europe before Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was in 40, actually. And then, of course, from Pearl Harbor, we went 2 directions after Pearl Harbor.
Do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor happened?
Pearl Harbor, I was out in North Dakota. I was visiting my mother.
What year was that? Was that 41?
41, I think, yeah.
Was that a big shock to everybody?
Yeah, it was to everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the people that were over there in Pearl Harbor that didn't know it was happening. That was a horrible mess.
Were you immediately called back in?
Hmm?
You were on leave or something, right?
Well, I may have been on leave out there on vacation just before I went back in. I think it was, yeah.
Wow.
No, I couldn't have been out there at that time. That was when Germany declared war. Cause, on December 7th, Pearl Harbor. Yeah, no, I wasn't out there then. I think I don't know where I was. I really don't. I'd have to know the exact, I couldn't tell you where I was. Don't keep track of those things.
What about some of the other big things that happened in history? Do you remember where you were when
Well,
JFK was shot?
when Kennedy was shot, I was just going home for lunch from where I was working over in St. Louis Park.
Where were you working then?
I was with a retail store. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's out of business also. But I was just on the way home for lunch when that news came on that he was shot.
What did you think of that? I mean, did people buy the whole Warren report thing when that came out?
Well, there's still argument over that Warren report thing, yeah. But people are not. I think Kennedy, had he lived, would have been a good president, even though he's a Democrat.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it's the ideas that he had, and he was more in Roosevelt's footsteps, so to speak, I think.
What about the Challenger explosion? Do you remember where you were?
The
when
what?
that happened? The Challenger, the space shuttle?
Oh, yeah. When that blew up, I was installing a microwave for Marge's cousin when that happened.
Isn't it amazing how big events seem to just burn in our brains exactly where we were and what we were doing?
Right.
no matter how simple it was.
Right. Yep.
What other major things do you remember happening? How about when Reagan was shot?
When Reagan was shot, I couldn't tell you where I was at that time.
I was at your house.
Hmm?
I was at your house.
Were you?
I was watching it on television with Grandma
Hmm.
on the news.
Yeah.
You might have been there.
Could have been. Could have been.
Yeah, I think I missed some questions back here. How old were you when you retired?
62.
So you've been retired for 18 years?
18 years.
Kind of retired?
Hmm? Kind of
Kinda.
retired, yeah.
So what do you do now? You,
I don't have time to do anything but what I have to do.
oh, yeah, well, of course.
Um,
None of us do.
yeah. But I'd like to have more time to do things I'd like to do.
Like what?
Go camping, go fishing.
Like we're going to do tomorrow?
Right, right.
I'm excited about that.
I was surprised your dad wrote you to find out if I'd go fishing with him.
What's that?
I say I was surprised when your dad wrote to you that to get me to go fishing with him.
Oh,
All he'd have to do,
I was all excited.
all he'd have to do is call up anytime I'll go fishing with him.
Oh, yeah. You ever had any pets?
Pets, just 3 kids,
But you never had a dog or a cat or anything?
not of my own.
No?
No.
I mean, as a family? Did you ever have a family
No.
dog or anything like that? Why not?
Just never had one.
Really?
Dogs
Thought about
belong in the country.
Ah,
Kids belong in the country, but you have to raise your kids where you live, so you raise your kids in the city. But dogs belong in the country.
kids belong in the country too?
They belong in the country, yeah. But you got to raise them where you live.
Is there anything you've always wanted to do but haven't done?
Not that I can think of.
So you've done everything you always wanted? Everything you
Well,
wanted?
as things come along that I want to do, I do them. So, I mean, I have no great desire to do anything other than live the life as I see it.
So you don't want to do like John Glenn and go up in the space shuttle?
And I have no ambition for that. No.
No?
One thing I might enjoy doing, and it would be a one-shot job, is driving an 18-wheeler.
That'd be kind of neat.
I've piloted an airplane, and I've piloted a fishing boat. An ocean-going fishing boat. I pilot a school bus. I mean, not school bus, but church bus all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most fabulous thing there is. Those are the greatest people.
Tell me about what those people are like to you.
They're just fabulous people. Every one of them they're so appreciative of anything you do for them, and they're just nothing better.
And now, these are the people, the old folks at church that call you the young whippersnapper, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I bet they really love that.
Yeah, they are great people. The sad part of it, that thing is they keep dropping off. Yeah. But that's the fate that we all go through.
Too true.
Yeah.
I got some fun little lists here that are kind of fun to go through, which is redundant. What's your favorite style of music?
Favorite style of music? Actually, my favorite music is hymns, church hymns, church music.
What are your favorite hymns?
The Old Rugged Cross. I can't think of right offhand, but any of the old hymns are fun to sing and to listen to. I can sing some of those old hymns. I can't sing the new modern stuff.
Right.
I can't sing anyway, but I mean, I can make a pleasant noise anyway.
Make a joyful noise.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite musical instrument?
Probably the organ.
Just any organ or the big pipe organs?
Pipe organ.
Yeah. This whole list here is all favorites. Do you have a favorite musical group?
Nope.
None?
Nope.
Not even any of the ones that do, like, praise music or hymns or anything like that?
No.
Do you have a favorite, you already told me your favorite song is
Yeah.
the old Rugged Cross?
Some of those,
That's
yeah.
one of my dad's favorite too.
Yeah, yeah.
How about a favorite singer?
Favorite singer? I can't say that I have any favorite.
Any that you admire?
Not that I can think of at the moment. No.
How about movie star?
Movie stars? I don't know that I have any favorites there either. John Wayne was one that was fun to watch. Lucille Ball was probably one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
See, that and Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
Yeah,
They're the ones that did the Who's on First.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And many
And Joe Lewis was it? Joe Lewis, Joe. Yeah, Joe Lewis.
What did he do?
He was a comedian. Joe Lewis. There's Joe Lewis who was a prize fighter. This is Joey Brown. Not
Joey
Joe
Brown.
Lewis. Joey Brown. Yeah.
You ever had a favorite movie?
No.
What are some of the ones that you really
Things that
like?
I can remember that I enjoyed was Tom Mix's movies and can't think of some of the other, but the westerns. I enjoy those a lot.
I remember riding in the van with you and Grandma and Britta, and you had the soundtrack to The Sound of Music play.
That's one of the nicest ones. Yeah, yeah.
How about a favorite artist? No?
No.
TV program?
TV program. Today's TV programs.
Today or any time in history?
Again, going back to Lucille Ball and some of those. Who was the guy that was the bus driver?
Cramden?
Cramden, yeah.
Honeymooners?
Yeah, Honeymooners, yeah.
What's your favorite author?
I don't know that I have any favorite authors.
No? What's your favorite book?
The Bible?
A lot of authors there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, all God, but a lot of
Yeah.
authors.
Right.
What's your favorite season?
Season? Probably spring,
Spring?
followed by fall. The only thing that's wrong with fall is winter follows that.
Don't like winter?
No, I don't mind it, but I could do without it.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you start living winters down in Florida, you will be doing without it.
Right, right.
You have a favorite tree?
Tree? Not really.
No? Not
Probably.
the white birch or the big oak or
Probably a Christmas tree.
Christmas tree?
Yeah.
How about a favorite flower?
Favorite flower? Probably a rose.
Just traditional red or one of the other colors?
Just a rose.
Favorite holiday?
Probably Christmas.
Why?
Get together as a family. Or Thanksgiving.
How about sports? You have any sports that you like a lot?
No, I'm not. I watch a little baseball and a little football, and that's it.
How about animals? What animals do you really like?
Horses and dogs. Don't care for cats.
You really like dogs, but you've never had one?
I say dogs belong in the country.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, I might have one. But I would not go apey over a dog like some people do.
Yeah, how about food? Do you have a favorite meal?
Breakfast.
Breakfast?
Yeah.
I remember going over to your house and we had breakfast for dinner a lot.
Yeah.
We loved that.
Yeah.
Especially when you made those pancakes,
With the bears.
the teddy bears.
Teddy bears, yeah.
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 How about fruit?
Fruit. Probably apples.
And rhubarb?
Rhubarb, yeah. I wasn't thinking of that as a fruit, but rhubarb is my
I
favorite.
guess rhubarb is probably a vegetable, isn't it?
Hmm?
Is rhubarb a vegetable?
I don't think so. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's just good, I know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't get that down south,
Yeah, I know.
except frozen.
It has to freeze out in order to be good, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite vegetable? Now, there's a vegetable I know of that you've eaten some pretty interesting sandwiches made out of this vegetable.
Interesting sandwiches made out of the
With peanut
vegetable.
butter.
Oh, onion and
Yeah.
peanut butter, yeah. Yeah. Peanut butter onion sandwich, you can't beat them.
Any other weird things that you like to eat?
Yeah, I like sardines.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and some people can't stand them. I like oysters.
Mm. Smoked raw or
Cooked
Cooked?
stew,
Stew?
oyster stew.
Mm.
They're okay fried, but I prefer them as stewed.
You ever eat any of those weird Norwegian things? You know, like lutefisk?
No,
No?
no.
Hang on just a second.
It's on now, isn't it?
Tuck that in there. And I'm pretty sure I've got the camera on. Yep. Okay, we're just about done. We just got a list here. Think for a moment about all of your family members. Your spouse, children, parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles, cousins, so on and so forth. Of all of them, who best fits the following descriptions? Who is the best cook?
The best cook? Well, I get killed if I say it, but your grandmother was, followed by Gail.
Yeah. Well, we'll just make sure Gail doesn't get a copy of this tape.
Oh.
Who's the hardest worker?
Me?
You?
Yeah. I used to be able to outwork my kids. I can't anymore, but I used to be able to.
Yeah. Who's the quietest?
Me? Who is the quietest? Oh boy. I really couldn't tell you that. I don't know who would be considered the quietest.
Who has the best memory?
Who has the best memory?
Do you remember anyone who could just remember everything?
My Aunt Laura could. She would remember lots of stuff that she'd probably be the one, yeah.
Who's the best gardener?
Was it Gail?
Really?
Huh?
What kinds of things does she like to garden?
Flowers and stuff, not vegetable stuff, but flowers. And
Yeah.
she likes to do it. She hasn't been doing recently as much as she'd like to, but we're always at the wrong place at the wrong time and not here when the garden should be taken care of. So.
Who's the funniest person you remember?
Funniest person I remember? Going back to the other question on the gardener, Steve is probably, he's got gardens coming out of his ears. So
Steve Galeson? Steve?
Yeah. But as far as the funniest, I don't know.
You don't ever remember
The
someone that just kept you
whole
in...
family is kind of funny, queer like that, you know?
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't ever remember anybody that just kept you in stitches? Laughing so hard?
Not really.
You remember anyone that was a real animal lover?
An animal lover? Well, Kathy's a cat lover.
Yeah?
And dogs. I guess she would be the one that would be more animal lover than...
How about the most politically active?
I would say that would have to be me.
I would agree. How about the most mischievous?
Most mischievous? Well, when he was younger, and when he was alive, was my brother.
Bill?
Bill.
Bill, yeah.
He could get in more things than I could, and try to get me into more things than I wanted to. And he was always on the very edge.
Do you remember anything that he got you into?
Well, he got me into a lot of trouble. He used to run away from home and take me along as I would follow him.
How old were you?
I was 2 years younger than him. We lived at one time before Mother married Roy. We lived in the edge of an Indian reservation out in that was in North Dakota. North Dakota, I think, close to Bismarck. And the Indians would go back and forth to and from town in a team and wagon, go into town. So one day Bill hopped on the back of this Indian wagon and went on into town. He wanted me to go along. I wouldn't go. And he's gone for probably 2 hours, and Mom says, "Where's Bill?" I says, "In town with an Indian." About 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes the Indian back. Bill jumps off the wagon. Came on home.
And the Indians didn't even know he was there?
Oh yeah, he was talking. He'd been talking to the Indian.
Wow. Who would you say was the calmest person you remember?
Calmest?
Someone that just nothing ever rattled them.
Well, other than us kids, my mother. I mean, we would rattle her, but other than that, she was pretty calm.
Yeah? What about the most athletic?
I don't know. I don't know of anybody that's real athletic.
No? Most intelligent?
Joe?
Who?
You.
Yeah, right.
Well, you can do stuff that I can't do that takes intelligence to do.
How about the most educated?
Most educated?
Uh-huh.
Well, Chuck has a master's. Nance has a master's. But what's education?
Good point.
I mean, if you're talking book learning, those two would be it. When it comes to educated,
What about wisdom? Who's the wisest person? You remember?
I really can't tell you that either. Who would be the wisest?
Remember any grandparents or aunts or uncles that you thought were particularly wise?
No. None of them, though, that stand out as any Solomon, no.
No. What about the most creative person?
I can't think of any stand out on that either. Creativity.
Grandma was pretty creative.
Cooking wise and that sort, yes, she was.
Her flower arrangements and her
Mm.
knitting.
Yeah,
and her-
yeah, she was. She was, yeah. Looking at it that way, yeah.
Who had the wildest lifestyle?
The wild little lifestyle. I think my brother Bill,
Really? Why would you say that?
because he was just wild. He built himself a racing skiff.
What is that?
It's a boat that's for racing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he died in.
Oh no.
But I mean, that's the things that he did. I mean, he was reckless in life, is what it amounts to, and that's why he died.
Now, how did that recklessness get him and it never affected you?
I don't know. Just, I mean, two kids born one after the other are not always the same.
That's true.
If he'd have been a first and I'd have been a third, we could have been a lot more alike.
Mm-hmm. Who's the most sociable?
Most sociable?
Likes to talk to everybody. Likes to talk to everybody.
I really couldn't say which one would be most sociable.
Most colorful?
Well, we have no Latinos in the family that I know of.
I think the question is asking about personality.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't know. You'd have to name that.
I would?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd probably name you. Or my dad.
Yeah.
My dad's pretty colorful.
He's got a good sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. How about the most frugal?
Most frugal? Probably me. I'm serious. Kids say when they spend money like it's going out of style. Dave's got more money than he knows what to do with. Chuck is not too bad off. Your mother's not bad off. I think of me.
How about most generous?
With time or talent or what?
Everything. On the whole, time, talent, energies.
Well, I think that all the family part that I know of are willing to spend time and talent to help one another, to do things like that. So I can't name any specific.
Okay, here's an easy one. The tallest.
The what?
The tallest.
The tallest? Well, if our direct family would be Chuck. No. Yeah. Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The shortest?
Hmm?
The shortest?
The shortest? Probably Britta.
Yeah. How about your mother?
Yeah. I don't know how tall Britta is.
How tall is your mother?
4'11".
Oh, Britta's 5-something. Like 5'2" or 5'3".
Yeah.
And the last one, who is the best storyteller?
The best storyteller? I can lie a lot.
So you're saying you can tell a good story?
Well, I probably could, but I don't know what it would be. No, I don't know who would be the best storyteller.
Back to a question that we asked before. For your children and your grandchildren, tell me again your advice for us,
Your advice?
for our lives.
Well, number one, put the toilet seat down.
Well, yes, we've gotten that one
Right.
down. Yes.
Be honest, sincere, be frugal and generous. Love one another and do what you can for each other. Beyond that, I don't know.
It's all great advice. Thanks.
You want these shut off now?
Yeah.